Ahoy mateys! And welcome once more to the House of Hammer. Or, for this particular episode, aboard the houseboat of Hammer. I do hope none of you get seasick, because we're taking to the water. So, I'm at the ship's wheel, aiming to avoid all sea-going hazards and guide us safely into port. But of course, I'm not on board alone. We've got Adam trimming the jib, Kev climbing the rigging, and Smokey, well, walking the plank, after he's thoroughly mopped the poop deck. But Benjamin, I hear you cry, why all of this nautical merriment? Well, dear listener, it's all owing to the film for this episode, The Jack of Diamonds, a 1949 mystery thriller with a bit of comedy to boot, all set on ocean fare. But before I say any more, let's drop the anchor here, get Kev down from the crow's nest, because he's going to give us a little background information on both the film and give us an update as to where Hammer were towards the end of 1949, when this film was released.
In the grand scheme of things, Jack of Diamonds is something of an oddity. Although made by a number of Hammer technicians of the time, part financed by Will Hammer himself, and distributed by Hammer's sister company Exclusive, it seems to have fallen out of favour with the creators of the official list of Hammer films. Does this mean it's a diet Hammer rather than the full fat? And if so, why include it? As far as we're concerned, it's more than qualified, and we're not on our own either, with quite a few people very much in the know agreeing with us too. Which brings us to the subject of unofficial Hammer films. Jack of Diamonds isn't the only one. There's quite a few films and TV shows that join it, and the list carried on until the end of the 70s, with some very hot properties in there, and it's due mainly to the sometimes insanely complicated deals struck up with different film companies, producers and distributors. This was, and still is, a standard practice to protect the money men from financial ruin if the project finally bombs. But unfortunately, it also means there's never going to be that complete Hammer box set available, because the catalogue is simply scattered so far and wide that even finding a half-decent original negative would tax the finest detectives history has to offer. And even though we've seen our fair share, there's still plenty of them to come. Released on the 23rd of May 1949, we're soon going to be bidding farewell to the 40s and entering yet another phase of Hammer's fascinating story, where this method of co-production would bear fruits that saw the studio become a real force to be reckoned with. Some would say a powerhouse of Hammer. No? Just me then. Okay. This period is the most prolific Hammer would become. We've mentioned in passing that it'll be a while before we get to the likes of Cushing and Lee, and it's because with 6 films released in 1949, Hammer was simply warming up the engines.
Thanks for that, Kev. Now, get yourself below decks to the galley and prepare lunch. I think we'll have salted pork and biscuits. Oh, and half a lime to stave off the scurvy. Although, alas, I fear it's probably too late for Smokey. By the way, if you're tiring of my constant maritime references, it's probably best that you hurl yourself overboard at this point. But should we get back to the film? I tell you what, let's. The plot of The Jack of Diamonds sees Roger and Joan Keane down on their luck and having to rent out their luxury yacht to earn some cash. Along comes adventurer Alan Butler, who wants the Keanes to take him across the water to the continent, where he assures them he knows the location of some sunken treasure he intends to recover.
The one thing you can do is to run a ship. Run it as a business.
What, all aboard for the Skylark, 3 miles round the bay?
No, darling, I'm serious. Well, we might run pleasure cruises abroad. Then the customers would have no hotel expenses and all their allowance to spend. I think it'd be rather fun. You'd be the captain, I'd do the catering, we'd make a fortune.
Darling, I'm afraid I wouldn't be very much good at that sort of thing. You see, I'd be rude to the customers.
Why, sweet, you said yourself, we've got to do something.
You see, when fleeing the continent from the Nazis during World War II, Alan was tasked with taking a box full of loot to the relative safety of the UK. But alas, only a little way out to sea, the boat was sunk and the treasure lost. However, whilst bobbing up and down in the water, Alan apparently shook off the trauma of almost being drowned by the Nazis, and was savvy enough to take note of his exact location using landmarks on the shore, knowing he could one day return to the spot and locate the treasure.
What exactly is your proposition?
First, I must tell you, I have no money.
That's grand. Neither have we.
Oh. We're all in the same boat, aren't we? We proceed to a position on a yacht. Your yacht. We anchor, send on a diver to mend the rudder or paint its bottom or a new leg. We locate the wreck, fish up the treasure, my treasure, and split it. 2/3 to me and 1/3 to you.
How long is it going to take us?
Oh, a week at the most.
What do you say, dear?
I say yes. What can we lose?
Should you be thinking to yourself, Lost and Found World War II riches forming the basis for a cinematic adventure is fair enough, but just how realistic is it? Well, hold your horses, or indeed, your seahorses, because here's our good friend Adam Roach to tell you about some real-life Lost World War II treasures. Keep your eyes peeled for some of these turning up on Bargain Hunt.
The treasure chest of jewels hidden during World War II in 1949's The Jack of Diamonds might seem somewhat fantastical to some. We have been spoiled by popular fiction when it comes to fanciful tales of daring do, treasure maps and X marks the spots, etc. But how realistic is the notion of wartime treasure hoards, and do any actually exist outside the realms of fiction? Well, honestly, there's far more mislaid wartime treasure out there than you might think. Take the fabled Honjo Masamune sword, for instance. Goro Masamune was the greatest swordsmith in all of history, working primarily in the 13th and 14th century. Today, one of his swords can fetch anywhere upwards of around $10 million per piece. The Honjo sword was a legendary blade handed down from shogun to shogun, but during World War II, when the Americans occupied Japan, this most exquisite work was confiscated by soldiers who were rounding up anything that could be used as a weapon against them and carted off to the States. Somewhere along the way, however, it went missing and has never been recovered, meaning that it's either the pride of someone's private collection right now or stuffed away in someone's attic. One day it'll come to light and make someone extraordinarily rich. Talking of swords, how about the ceremonial Sword of Islam, created and bestowed upon Italian dictator and founder of the National Fascist Party, Benito Mussolini, in the hopes of using it as a symbol to rally the support of the Muslim population? It was a grand object, an arabesque blade featuring pieces of solid gold, and Mussolini took the opportunity to have many photo opportunities with it in the hopes of garnering their support. However, when the resistance plundered his castle in 1943, the sword was snatched and has never been seen since. Well, how about Peking Man, a priceless fossil of early man dating from 500,000 years ago, which was lost during 1941, when Americans moved them from Beijing during the war. The rumors are that Peking Man is somewhere at the bottom of the sea, having been on the Awamaru ship when it sank, but hopes still remain that this unique artifact is sitting in a vault somewhere. The Awamaru has been at the center of several legends, which declare that somewhere in its belly was not just a box of fossils, but also gold, platinum, and diamonds worth more than $5 billion. If so, then the seabed it rests upon must be one of the most fertile and bountiful patches on Earth. Rather more glamorous is the Royal Casket of Poland, a large wooden box containing 73 precious relics belonging to the royal family there. At the outset of World War II, the casket was ransacked by the Wehrmacht, who made off with such treasures as the silver rosary of Queen Marie, the gold snuff box of King Stanislav August, and the silver filigree cutlery of Prince Zygmunt. For the last 50 years, hopeful treasure hunters have been scouring the Philippines for traces of the legendary Yamashita treasure. a collection of loot stolen by the Imperial Japanese Army from Southeast Asia, which apparently contains enough gold to finance a world banking system. Whispers have prevailed for some time that the gold was found. Indeed, Imelda Marcos herself has said that the fortune was found and used to bolster the riches of her husband Ferdinand, but nothing has ever been proved. In the Catherine Palace in St. Petersburg was a single room bedecked in panels of pure amber, gold leaf and mirrors constructed in the 18th century and known throughout the empire as the eighth wonder of the world. In fact, so resplendent was the ornate finery of the amber room that its materials alone, adjusted for inflation, would be worth today the sum of $142 million. Yes, you heard that right. To decorate this single room would cost $142 million, which coincidentally was the budget we were allocated to redecorate the pantry in the House of Hammer. However, when the Germans began to invade the Soviet Union, the curators responsible for the art treasures attempted to disassemble the room and store its components away. But as they did so, the amber began to dry out and become brittle, so the curators instead chose to cover the interior of the room with wallpaper until the conflict was ended. But so famous was the amber room of St. Petersburg that the invading Germans swiftly located it and conducted a wholesale deconstruction of the amber room. Since then, many legends have sprung up about the whereabouts of the famed amber, including one suggestion that it had been hidden in a silver mine, and another at the bottom of a lagoon. However, both have turned out to be false. As recently as 2020, reports surfaced that parts of the amber room had been found in the wreck of the SS Karlsruhe, sunk in 1945. However, by then, the famed prize of the Catherine Palace had been reconstructed by the Soviet government. In 1979, work had begun to replace the jewel of the Soviet Empire, matching in meticulous detail the amber used down to the very shade of material, a process that took 24 years and 40 experts to complete. Some feats, as the carving of amber was, at the time of reconstruction, an art form completely lost to modern civilization. But perhaps the most famous of all lost World War II treasures, one that prevails in popular culture despite the lack of evidence and abundance of dead ends, is the Nazi gold train. Now, according to the law, an armoured train laden with gold and other treasures left Breslau in Poland but never reached its destination in Woldenberg. According to the stories, the train entered a tunnel system in the Owl Mountains and remains there somewhere to this day, having been concealed in the hopes of recovering it later. Despite historians having insisted that the Nazi gold train has never existed, many, including government agencies, have endeavoured to find the treasure train and have expended their own fortunes in doing so. And so despite the somewhat fanciful notions that treasure chests are buried beneath the soil we walk upon today, the fact remains that many confirmed treasures are lost beneath our feet. Who knows? Maybe you will one day stumble across that elusive clue, the one indication that could lead you to a forgotten fortune from years gone by.
By heck, I'll tell you what, that was excellent stuff. But it's probably about time we get into what we thought of this episode's featured presentation, The Jack of Diamonds. And whilst discussing the movie, I was joined as ever by Kev Moore, Adam Roach, and Smokey. Just Smokey. Like Sinbad. You know, the sailor. This podcast doesn't just write itself, you know. Effort is put in.
Right, lads, we're kicking off with Torquay 1948. Now, I know it's hardly Los Angeles 2019, but it does kick off quite splendidly with lots of stock footage, and badly dubbed footage of ships and battleships and boats and sailing.
It does.
Yeah, and sailing is pretty important. I think it's fair to say, or boats in general, because we're kind of. I mean, this film is 90% on location. I think it's fair to say that's a lot of it. I mean, it feels very genuinely like we're with the characters where we're meant to be. We're on board or we're overseas in France. It definitely has that feel to it.
It does, and actually, I actually think it works to the film's favour. You're not. Forgive me, but you're not for the majority of the time. We've had this in several films so far already, when, especially in something like River Patrol, where people seem to be sidestepping a camera because the room was too small.
Yeah.
And, okay, granted, there are a couple of small sets at the beginning, but it was actually quite refreshing to be out in the open air and just have a bit of space. All right, granted, they didn't use it for the best all the time, but it was nice. It was nice to see this sort of different pace and setting to a Hammer film so far.
There was a little bit of studio footage. Tends to be the cabins where a lot of the exposition takes place. They were filmed at Carlton Studios. Now, I've not been able to find a great deal of detail on Carlton Studios, other than it's definitely down south somewhere.
It's in London, isn't it?
That makes sense. That's south.
Well, yes, it is. Yes, that's true.
South of Doncaster.
Anywhere south.
So is hell.
Everything south.
France, New Zealand, London. It's all the same.
So, Kev, talking about exposition, basically the setup of this film is very simple. You've got a couple who've apparently run out of money, but not like real poor people do, obviously, because they've still got a yacht. But they've run out of money apart from the yacht. So they think, well, what can we do with our massive, massive yacht? Well, why don't we rent it out, and that'll make us more money. And it takes them 5 minutes to come up with this plot device right at the beginning. So the whole premise of this is they're renting out their yacht for anyone to lend or to be taken wherever they want, and they happen across an adventure immediately.
I mean, I love this. This was great. I mean, yeah, okay, you say that. You say they've got no money, they're broke, but they respond to it in the most upper class way possible, which is, we're broke. Oh, well, let's have a stiff drink. Okay, fair enough. But you're not that broke, are you? When
they're not food bank broke. No, they're rich people broke.
They're rich people broke. We need to make that distinction very early on. They're rich people broke, which is not very.
That means they can't afford hummus for the weekend.
That's what it has to do.
Oh, they're on the bread line.
Yeah, the pita bread line.
They have to buy multi-pack beer.
Oh, how dare they? How dare they drink
Beer in a box?
Commoners
Who could
do.
think of such a thing?
And with perfect timing, Alan Butler arrives on the scene, who comes up with this rather complex scheme to dive for treasure off of the coast of France. And it all sounds too good to be true, perhaps. But Nigel Patrick, you're bound to believe him, because obviously he looks the type of person to be trusted, with that lovely moustache and that RAF bearing.
He looks like everyone that's been in every Hammer film we've seen so far.
That's
He has
true,
that kind
actually.
of, even if he doesn't look like them, he just reminds me of them. He is sort of, to this point, to 1949, he is Hammer personified. All of the characters are like him somehow.
He looks like Terry Thomas's dad, and at one point it does say that he works for the Continental Daily Mail, which they were sorry about. So, bonus.
I've got to say, though, Nigel Patrick, I thought he was the standout in this.
He was brilliant.
I thought he was excellent. I mean, he plays... I mean, the relationship he has with Roger, Cyril Raymond's character, I just thought he was... They had a wonderful chemistry. And don't get me wrong, there are some cringe-worthy moments about to arrive in the film. But the sort of bravado they had between them kind of worked for me. I quite like that.
The play that they had between all three of them, because there was Nigel Patrick, then, like you said, there was both of them, Cyril Raymond and Joan Carroll, that plays Joan Keane and Roger Keane. They kind of, I would say, like a comedy troupe aspect to it at points. There is moments of levity, especially when they go over to France and everybody ends up going, Joan! all the time, because Joan's the only one that can actually speak a lingo.
On a second viewing, the comedy worked better than it did. On the first viewing, it's like we've talked about this so many times before. Tonally, I didn't quite know what I was watching. I mean, was I meant to be taking this seriously or not? But on a second viewing, you realise it's a light-hearted caper, and it's actually pitched and written very well as such, because we will not spoil it. We never spoil these films. We try not to anyway. So there is a twist later on in the film, and it becomes slightly darker than originally we might sort of assume from the opening. Yet the moments of levity that have come before are kind of carried into the slightly darker tone, and it really works to keep you interested as an audience member, but also to keep the film flowing quite nicely, which again I thought,
or floating,
or flow, very good.
Oh, nice,
very good.
I'm here all day.
I've got to say though, and I've got to agree with you there, Ben. The first watch of it, and when this kind of vaudeville act of the two male leads started up, I was cringing on the inside and the outside as well. I was just all cringe. I was perma-cringe. And it just reminded me of that bit in Blackadder, when Blackadder's describing West End, vaudeville acts, and he's going, oh, what's up with you then? What's up with me then? I'm right browned off. Why are you browned off? And it was like that back and forth between them. And I thought it was horrible and misplaced. However, I will give you it, Ben. On the second viewing, it made a lot more sense.
Yeah.
It did. The tone takes a different shift. And as you say, it does become darker towards the end, and it becomes not very serious, but quite serious. And it actually sets it up quite well, because of the twist, it lends itself from a shift from a light comedy drama into a drama. And actually, I think it serves it really well.
I think that this film, it was very unexpected for me. That when we were talking about this film and reviewing it, it seemed like such a nothing on the Hammer filmography, and then we put it on. Well, I put it on, and I was absolutely pleasantly surprised to find that it was kind of like this, almost like a Clive Cussler kind of adventure romp. It was about, it kicks off ASAP. It's about a couple that are impoverished and they've got a boat. So what are they going to do? Let's hire it out to someone to see if they want to use it for something. And the first guy that comes along is a treasure hunter, and he takes them off on an adventure. And it was kind of like, well, this is cool. I'm glad that it's about this and not some seedy back room of some, contraband pub in the back alleys of England or something like that. It was nice to get out on location and see the water and see where the adventure takes you. And I really admire it for that. I do think that there's a lot of filler in the film. That, the ports they stop at and the people they meet along the way, I think half it could be done away with, but I really admire the ambition of the film. I really like the fact that it said, let's go and have an adventure instead of let's do something small. And for a B movie in 1949, that's really kind of admirable. It didn't have to be this. It didn't have to have this kind of scale or ambition behind it. So I'm very impressed, and I was really surprised by this film.
I mean, I've got to agree with you though as well. I mean, this is just a smidge too long. But I would say though that the scenes you're talking about, the sort of the exposition scenes and the building up of certain characters, but also, as you say, just, I mean, if they're docking at a port, they're going to one place, they're going to this place. I'd say keep them in, just make them shorter. knock a good 10 minutes off the film. I think that would be fine by making those scenes shorter. But I think the main thing that we really have to point out is that, because I know you like it and so do our listeners, is no pub. No pub. We sit outside a restaurant. That doesn't count.
But we get booze.
We get booze. We get plenty of booze. And we get plenty of soda. But we also get watering down.
It's called
alcohol.
White Claws, McGee, right? That's fine.
But all I'm saying is, no House of Hammer bingo this time. No pub. I'm sorry, my friends. It's just I've gotten so used to it now. I'm just conditioned to look for it. I'm sorry.
There is a pub mentioned. In fact, because one of the characters does a trail of the locals, and in fact the luxury yacht that they're on the breadline living in does have a bar. So does that not count?
Doesn't every house?
Nope.
A lot of the action does take place there.
It's like a Del Boy bar.
No, I'm sorry, Ben. I'm sorry. I see where you're coming from, and I'd love to give you that, the Dorber on the page for a full house, but no, it doesn't.
All I was doing was trying to help you, Smokey. That's all I was doing.
Did anyone else like the subtext between the three of them there? I mean, there's kind of an insinuation that the treasure hunter guy is gonna he's kind of got this thing going with Joan. There's like a bit of a rapport between them.
Oh, there's a threesome going on.
Yeah, exactly. I really liked that part of it. I thought that was very clever and sort of well observed. You got husband and wife, and this charming guy comes aboard, and he's not what he seems to be. And as the film goes on, you find out more about him. But as they travel, he gets closer to Joan, and sort of. I really kind of thought that was. It's one of those details that didn't really have to be there, but I'm glad it was, because it gives it a bit of an extra frisson. So you've got this, this adventure yarn, this treasure hunting saga, and then you have like a love triangle at the heart of it as well. That's what I like about this film. I think it's pretty admirable. Especially, I've seen a ton of B movies, and they're not as inventive as this one. So.
I think what I liked about it, though, was it never ruined the tone, because there was a schoolboy charm about the whole thing. The schoolboy innocence as much, because I didn't feel there was any sort of sexual tension or anything between them. But that said, it is one of the things that elevates this film slightly is there's a great deal of subtlety, because the hints are there as to Alan's true character throughout. If you're minded to look for them. There are clues as to the fact that he may not be entirely who he says he is, but the clues aren't really referenced directly in the script or in the way in which the film is presented. But certainly on a second viewing, I did find myself thinking, for a man who lived in France, it's interesting that he can't speak French, and that kind of thing. So they're not referenced directly, but
I know speak the language. Yeah, that was perfect French, wasn't it? Yeah, my word. But I've got to agree with you there, Ben. Again, repeated viewing of it definitely does help. But I just want to touch on there something that Adam said. There's a scene which 99% of it, again, pure cringe, when they're sat outside the restaurant and Joan is doing all the ordering for them in French because she's fluent and they're not.
Oh, I like that scene.
Some of it. And but then also is the fact that at the end of it, when everything has been ordered, they're so impressed with Joan that they both take her hand and kiss it. And that leads to what you say of the sort of the it's not a modern day throuple. It's there's a kinship there of love and respect, and it was kind of sweet, and I really dig that. I thought it was really nice and kind of unexpected as well, because I wasn't expecting that to happen. But yeah, very sweet.
Going on Joan's character, do any of you actually believe that she would have actually left Roger for Alan?
No.
Because she's pretty sorted, isn't she? She knows exactly what she's doing.
Wife, you can see that from the beginning.
She's
not gonna. It was not about betrayal at all.
Yeah. It's Nick and Nora. They only have eyes for each other. So.
Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly. Yeah.
But it's not just that. She, again, watching the film, she's the driving force behind not only the reason that they don't go under when they're supposedly broke with their luxury yacht, but she also basically saves the day in terms of working out the mystery or the sort of the secondary plot, and assisting quite radically with what is sort of how the film concludes as well. So it's another strong, well-written female 1940s female character who, yes, all right, she plays third fiddle in probably the how the film is not marketed as such, but she's probably third name on the poster and third character on the credits, but realistically, she's the main character.
Yeah.
It also goes to prove how progressive Hammer were being, doesn't it? I mean, we look back on this period and we think to ourselves that it was a time of rampant sexism and women were shoved in the kitchen and stuff, and it's obvious from the films we've seen so far that although that might have been the prevailing wind, it certainly wasn't dominant in every man's mind. Women are given a real chance to shine in these films, even as far back as Song of Freedom, where I would argue that Paul Robeson's wife in that movie was equally as heroic as she was, and I have to say that I really love the denouement of this film. Like, you get to the end and the adventure's done, and the couple kind of go, right, what's next? And they sort of put their arms around each other and look off towards the horizon, and I would actually have loved to have seen a series of films with this couple. I think they were very, very easy to watch and very fun and very attractive to watch. And it's another one of those Hammer missed opportunities, I think, when it comes to franchises that worked. It almost seems like they took the ones that didn't work to sequels, but the ones that really did work, like Celia and this, never got another chance to shine, which is a real shame.
I think that's a really good way of looking at it, and I agree. I'm going to echo your sentiments there and sort of say, if you think about it, in 10 years' time, when we get to the Hammer horror with the sort of, the corset busting, busty ravens that Hammer was kind of known for, and I know Ben likes those, and but we have now, in fact, I'm going to add this to the House of Hammer bingo of a plucky, spunky female, who is saving the day. We've had them so much over the last 10, 11 films.
We should put standout females into the Hammer bingo card, I think.
Absolutely, yeah, and it's happening
Definitely.
more and more and more that we keep watching these films. And do you know what? I hope it continues as well. Because as you say, Ben, Joan was, as you say, she's probably the third main character, but it really doesn't stop her from being the main character. She is the cleverest one out of the three, and it's so lovely to see. And again, agreeing with you, Adam, is that you think back to this time and you think maybe misogyny, it's rampant, but apparently it's not at Hammer. And isn't that just bloody wonderful?
Especially for a film, especially for a studio like Hammer, who are known for their busty beauties, in negligees, running around, the trees and being chased by, heroic men and seductive men. And there you have, like, the whole generation, the whole legacy was built upon decades of female empowerment. How surprising is that?
Yeah, it's weird that they took a kind of a backward step. When it got to the late 60s and the early 70s, by then they were very much going down the exploitation route to a lot of respect, even down to stuff like The Vampire Lovers, which was totally, just objectification, if you like. So they'd gone completely the opposite way round by the time it got to then. It's a strange move for a company that was so forward-looking for a long time.
Kev, can I ask you? You're an Amicus expert. having been, you know, you are here lies Amicus Man. But what were the other studios like at the time when it came to that kind of attitude? What about Tygon and Amicus? What were they doing? Late 50s.
Tygon were pretty much the same. They were into exploitation more than anything else. You know, even down to
you talking about Blood from Satan's Claw,
even down to the Wicker Man and Blood on Satan's Claw. Yeah, that's again, you know, very exploitative. But even down to Amicus, you know, you got films like Scream and Scream Again, where you got Yutti Lensgaard, I think it is, from she's in The Vampire Lovers, and she's there just as set decoration for a certain point. So it's all pretty much going that way at that particular time. Let's talk about the film then. We'll not give anything away about the ending, but what I will ask is, obviously, I'm going to ask you all what you thought of the film, but also what you would have liked to have seen next for the Keens. And I'll go with you first, Ben.
So overall, I enjoyed it. It's a nice little film. I don't mean that in a patronising way. It's got a decent little twist in the middle. Kept me interested. I'd agree with some of the comments that it's slightly bloated, even for a 65-minute film. But no, I enjoyed it. I think my expectations were low, which has helped with my overall experience. I am going to give my favourite line of both this film and of, I think, every Hammer film so far. So to add a little bit of context, towards the end of the film, for whatever reason, some people have to fake a fire on a boat to try and attract the attention of another boat. And there is the line, which is utterly terrific, of, "Oh, I say, that's complete smoke," which I'm now going to use it at every possible juncture that I can, because I think that's tremendous. So complete smoke, that's definitely
my new name.
So as a rating wise, I think I'd give it 7 out of 10, because I really enjoyed it. And in terms of what I'd like to see the Keens do next, I'm 90% certain on a second viewing that they've stolen the jewellery. So I'd like to see them do something positive with the money that they make from that. So it would be nice if they maybe sailed to somewhere impoverished and helped some poor people.
The more I think about this movie, the more I think it's like a very early prototype of the Indiana Jones formula. No, I don't mean it's as thrilling as that. I mean, it's, you know, ordinary people, they begin a thing and they go off on an adventure and it takes them to the far flungs of this, and there's a plot twist and they're trying to search for treasure. And as Ben said, it was a complete surprise. I didn't expect this film to be about this at all. So I was utterly thrilled by the whole thing. I you know, as soon as it became clear that they were off on an adventure to find some hidden treasure, I was like, wow. This is something I haven't seen for a very long time in an old film. So I was hooked. I do think there are plenty of scenes that could be cut out. You know, they stop and talk to people, and all of those bits kind of seem a little bit unnecessary. But it's quite clear that, you know, Vernon Searle was trying to make an A film out of B movie material. So I can understand why it's there. I would totally give this film a 7 out of 10, like Ben did. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I think they're very charming characters, and I love the invention that the plot, you know, indulges in. I think, you know, it's rare to have a plot like this and suddenly say, well, let's turn things on its head and put a bit of a twist in there. As for their subsequent adventures, I would love to have seen them trying to go for the golden idol that Indiana Jones went for at the beginning of Raiders of the Lost Ark, and I totally think they are the skeletons that end up on the spears that come out of the wall. I think that was Joan and Roger, I'm sorry to say it, but they got a lead on the golden idol. They went off into the South American jungle, and they ended up on a load of spears. It's that kind of vibe, you know. It's a very early prototype. If you like Indiana Jones, if you like that kind of Sahara, Clive Cussler kind of vibe,
yeah.
This is like, you can see the blueprints of that formula totally clear on this film. It's not as refined and it's not as thrilling, but it's there definitely. You could totally put this film in a box set with those kinds of movies and say this is an adventure box set. So it works as that. Jack of Diamonds, complete surprise and definitely worth seeking out.
No pub, none out of 10. No. As I mentioned to you guys off mic, one of the things that I've really, really enjoyed about taking this journey with you through Hammer has been things that have been thrown up that have been such a surprise, and we to discover some of these films that are just either overlooked or just forgotten or anything like that, and known by a very few select amount of people, is one of the absolute joys of doing this. And so we have to look at it as this film as one of those. Unfortunately, whereas something like Dr. Morell was just a letdown. It didn't do anything for any of us. And when Adam let us know about what Dr. Morell, how he was supposed to be, that made it even worse somehow. But when it comes to this film, we have no frame of reference, really. It's just a random story. And do you know what? I found this thoroughly charming. I really enjoyed it. Yeah, and as Ben said, that's not to denigrate it at all by calling it little, but it is a charming little film. Adam's right; it needs to be a little shorter, but yeah, charming, absolutely charming. And I've rated it online as well. I gave it a 7 out of 10, exactly the same as you lads. Yeah, just a charming film. Yeah, very enjoyable.
Right. Well, just to
Kevin.
be slightly contrary to the
Kevin!
rest of you,
What's wrong with you?
Kevin.
No. I was going to say this was perfectly the perfect length. At no time did I feel like there was anything you could trim. There was some scenes where you think, oh yeah, we could get rid of the scene with the policeman, for instance, the French policeman. But that sets up a lovely comedy angle with the two that are sat there on the boat, clearly not understanding a word this French policeman is saying, and then repeatedly shouting for Joan, because she's the only person that can only speak French. So, I don't know. I'm with the filmmakers. I think Vernon Sewell did a cracking film here. Obviously, it's set on Vernon Sewell's own yacht, which is called the Galert, because obviously he could do it cheap and still manage to get in a quick jolly to the north of France as well, you know, and tie this in, which is a cunning use of any film budget. If you remember, Duran Duran once said that the only reason they based Rio in Rio, as far as the video was concerned, was so that they could have a quick jolly. And to me, this is exactly the same thing.
Her name was Grimsby, and she dances.
Her name was the Solent, and she dances.
But yeah, there's also what we've not mentioned is the music by Frank Spencer. Another one by Frank Spencer, which is actually I know.
It will never not be funny to me every time I see that in the credits.
It's possibly his finest work we've heard so far, because to me, this is the most together any of his scores have sounded. They've sounded like it is actually made for the film. It's not just library music thrown higgledy-piggledy. He's actually written this properly, so it's almost as if he's actually had a little bit of time.
He's too busy falling into a bathtub,
which is
before that.
Weird. On roller skates.
Yeah, roller skating down a hill.
The boat was called Oh Betty.
Smokey.
I was just going to say, right, this may be a very large pull that I've got to make. But do you remember the scene in Jaws when the guys you've got Dreyfus and you've got Quinn? Don't Ben, put your head. You got Robert Shaw and you. Oh God, you got them all on the boat and it's pulling away. And John Williams's jig plays out. There is an official title for it. And when the boat is pulling out, it does exactly the same in this.
Yeah.
but about 40 years before it, 30 years, 35
Yep.
years before it. And I was just looking at this, and I was watching it and hearing the jig when they get away from the dock and they pull away, and I was just like, it's got to be. This has got to be where John Williams has got his inspiration.
I bet you £100,000 it's not.
Well, we'll never know, will we? But he's not listening. But I'm going to say that he agrees with me, and just
it's up to
never
John
check
Williams
the
to prove you wrong.
But-
That's all I'll say. Okay, right? Until he
Exactly.
does, you're right.
Mr. Williams, phone me. But no, I'm just saying there was a similarity there between that scene in Jaws and that scene in this. I'm sorry, Ben.
Yeah.
You can shake your head all you want, but I think I'm right.
It's almost as if two professional film composers independently came up with similar music about the ocean. Who'd have thought it?
I did.
No,
Do you know
I do
what,
like
right,
it.
mate? Right, I'm going to challenge you. Watch those scenes back to back, and you tell me.
Okay, I won't. I mean, I will, yeah.
Didn't.
Yeah, well, your favourite's Jaws 3 anyway.
That's my favourite too, I have to say. Mine.
Jaws 2 is my
Mine's Jaws-
favourite. The
mine's Jaws
shark
of
eats a
Revenge.
helicopter.
Eating
The shark eats a
We
helicopter.
know.
Mine's Jaws of Revenge. Anything with Michael Caine getting eaten by a shark is fine.
So definitely we'll wrap it up right there before we do start fighting over a shark and stolen treasure.
It's not. That sounds way more thrilling than this conversation. Please, let's do that instead.
Oh, wait, I tell you what. No, actually, talking about sharks and stolen treasure, my next adventure for the Keens wouldn't be either. It would be in space. They would go out into space, have a crazy galactic empire-based adventure, and then, just like Jason X, they would then be dropped right back into the pond in Cricklewood.
In the year 2455, on a routine training mission, a team of students is about to discover a life form frozen in time.
Oh, I say, it's complete smoke.
After all the silliness, I will definitely give it an 8 because I feel like this is a step in the right direction.
Perhaps Kev has in fact stumbled upon the next big franchise crossover. Never mind Friday the 13th Part 9, Jason Goes to Hell. We've got Friday the 13th Part 27, Jason joins the Keens at a French restaurant and orders a chop. A chop, get it? Because he carries a machete. Never mind, I'm wasted here. Before we leave, we've got one more little treat, one last little winkle in the pot. Despite the fact the Jack of Diamonds has absolutely nothing to do with playing cards, the title obviously uses that illusion. And hence we thought a little segment about the history of playing cards might be apt. And so, to tell you all about that, here's our own little winkle, Smokey.
A little behind the curtain here, for all you lovely listeners. Here at the House of Hammer, when we're preparing the show, the four of us get together and have a little chat. A few drinks are had and a catch-up with our daily goings-on and routines is indulged, and then we start planning the episode that eventually reaches your ears. If you're a regular listener, you'll know that we all throw in the occasional segment, whether it's to do with something relevant to the film we're discussing, a lovely new Hammer hero, or the state of affairs at the time the movie was made. But every now and then, we'd like to give you a smidgen of a history lesson too, including topics such as the illegal smuggling of nylon stockings, or the frankly still mind-meltingly baffling explanation of Old English currency. So, when the opportunity arose, due to the nature of the name of today's feature, to do something of an in-depth look into the inception of the humble playing card and how we know and love them today, yours truly accepted the hand I was dealt, and proceeded down this particular rabbit hole. And oh, what a hole it is. sticking to the basic, and I mean very basic facts, when it comes to playing cards. It seems that the earliest examples can be found in China, somewhere around the 9th century AD. Now you see why I'm sticking to the basics. If I was to go all the way back to the 9th century, and trust me, I'm sure there's some listeners out there who wish I would, then this particular episode would be longer than, say, well, a Cary Grant podcast documentary. Anyway, these cards obviously bear very little resemblance to the cards we use today, but the germination is definitely there to see. Also, with these reports dating so far back in time, there's a lot of hearsay and speculation, such as the cards themselves having a monetary value. So instead of chips or cash used as tender, if the player lost a card to their opponent, the value of that card went to them. Doesn't sound so far-fetched, but we'll probably never know. After China, the resulting popularity of playing cards for money, and sometimes just simple playtime, spread rapidly across Asia and into Europe as well. The playing card coming to Europe appears to be rather markedly important. Due to most Europeans' obsession, both then and now, with having monarchies, this seems to be where the common occurrence of having a king, queen, and our favourite of the day, a jack, in the deck comes from. But Smokey, I hear you ask, what about the suits? Please tell us all about the suits, great and powerful Smokey. You know what? You can be a demanding bunch, but you're lucky I really like you, aren't you? Well, once again, very basically, cards needed to be easily defined. I mean, if you've got 4 individual cards and they all look near identical, it's going to be bloody difficult to know if you can actually go fish or not, isn't it? Or build a bridge, for that matter. I mean, that's what you do when you play bridge, isn't it? You actually build one? Never played it, couldn't tell you. A little aside here, I've got a promotional lock, stock and 2 smoking barrels deck, and they practically are indistinguishable from each other, which led to a hasty retreat to the junk drawer to find a deck so me and my chums could actually complete our first game of 3-card brag that night. Anyway, back to those pesky Europeans. The original cards more than likely were distinguished by fruits or weapons, such as grapes and swords. I saw grapes and swords at the Reading Festival, and they were a huge letdown. But when cards came over to Italy, Germany and France, things began to change. You morph from seeded foodstuffs and stabby killy things to leaves and shields and hearts or roses, bells and acorns. It's pretty easy to see how we've ended up with hearts, diamonds, clubs and spades from there, isn't it? So now we come to the current day, and they're still as popular as ever, if not even more so. Practically every city and probably every US state has some kind of casino or gambling establishment in it. Maybe every home has a deck hidden away somewhere. I mean, hell, here in the UK, you sometimes get one of those miniature packs in a Christmas cracker. And, of course, what about popular culture? You go from anywhere from Maverick to The Sting, from Wild Bill Hickok's infamous Dead Man's Hand, to Motorhead's equally brutal Ace of Spades. I've got to be honest with you, my friends, it's a rabbit hole well worth checking out. Oh, but just a tiny bit of advice for you? Don't do what I did and find out what playing cards means on Urban Dictionary. Okay? Good. No, I said don't!
So, there you have it. Smokey pulls an ace from his hole and flushes a royal bluff. Or similar. What a joker. Anyway, that's about it for this trip aboard the houseboat of Hammer. It's almost time to moor ourselves back on dry land for the next episode, where we'll be meeting Simon Cherry, the crime-solving vicar. And he's joined by Mr. Stamper, the head-busting curate. Part of that is made up by me, and you'll have to decide which. Should you wish to follow us on the socials, you can do so either on Twitter at HouseHammerPod or on Instagram at the very same. And should you want to send us an email, I mean, I won't read it, but someone might, you can do so at scream@houseofhammerpodcast.com. I jest, of course, someone will read it and then print it out and eat it. But enough of all this. Until next time, it's goodbye from me, Ben Taylorson.
From me, Smokey.
From me, Adam Roach.
And from me, Kev Moore.
Be sure to join us again soon in the House of Hammer.